السلام عليكم أخواني المدربين. أنا اسمي اسلام. مدرب منتخب أقل من 18 سنة في تونس. أول شيء أود أن أبتدئ به هو أن أعتذر عن عدم استعمالي للغة العربية، لأن استعمال اللغة العربية الفصحى يكون صعبا في مصطلحات كرة السلة. وإذا استعملت لهجة من اللهجات، يعني كان حكيت معكم بالتونسي ما كنتش باش تفهموني بالكدا. هذاك علاش I'm gonna try to do this in English, so everybody can understand me, and I can feel a little bit more comfortable using basketball abbreviations or speaking about the game itself. So before I start, I want to thank the Arab Confederation for the trust they've put in me, and also the Tunisian Basketball Federation for asking me to share a little bit of my ideas, things that I have actually picked up from other coaches, which is actually the art of basketball. It's basically about intelligently picking up ideas from other people, and that means not only listening and copying, but actually listening, understanding, adapting, and then trying to use that again in a way or another. Um, of course, there are a lot of coaches that I have learned from to get to the point of these ideas that I'm trying to share today with you, including coaches from Germany, where I have actually started coaching, Coach Mina, Coach Morsche, moving towards Sweden, where I have also been active in the last seasons, and then moving into Tunisia with Coach Abdelkrim, ou bien Coach Tletli, Coach Bin Sliman, different people that actually I have discussed this with, and a lot of other colleagues that I work with. So basically, I want to thank them for being part of my journey, and I hope that today I can share a little bit of the ideas that I have and my way of thinking about the game. Well, today's lecture is going to be about criteria and focus areas in youth player selection. And it starts actually with the fundamentals. So within the Tunisian national team, where I have joined a couple of months ago to start coaching, we have different pillars of actions that we run within the federation. And one of these actions is actually talent identification and selection, where we speak about national talent identification network. We speak about data-driven evaluation, and then club and school partnerships within the whole country. And now, the first thing that you would ask yourself when speaking about selection or detection or prospection is the question of like, what is actually talent? So what are we actually looking for when doing that exercise? The first thing I want to share with you is the fact that talent is not performance. So basically, if you see somebody that is performing or like putting up, I don't know, 50 points per game in a youth game, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the person we're looking for. What we look for is actually raw potential, which is a combination of like conditional, which means physical, psychological, tactical, technical, and coordination factors that must be taken raw and developed by us coaches, which is basically our job or what we are supposed to do. Now, how do we take talent and bring it to performance? Um, Doing that means we need some structured long-term training. We have to be very methodical about our support of that talent. And then we need to create a favorable environment, which includes a lot of factors: family, the infrastructure, the coach that is actually working with that person, and a lot of other factors. And any of these can actually determine if the talent is going to be nurtured or if it's going to actually die and become what we call a long-term talent or the eternal talent. So what we say here is that a high level talented or potential without a proper guidance, they can stagnate. So at the end, they can sometimes never reach the top level. And we all know from our playing time that one person that used to be amazingly in advance and better than anybody else on the court, but never made it actually to the top level. Here, we speak a lot also about the talent puzzle. It's actually a mistake to just assess a young athlete's potential just based on a single dimension. Let's say somebody is like 2 meters 20. That's not enough. It's not the only thing that you should look at. Development varies according to the discipline, physical and biological maturity, and also to the social context that the person is being put in. So even without competitive success, a young athlete may actually have high level potential, and we should look at that. What is the critical period? It is actually before puberty. So before or during puberty, it is almost impossible to reliably predict an athlete's future. And there are a lot of examples also in Tunisia where some athletes have never been actually part of our U14, U16, or U18, but have become legends in basketball. And I'm speaking especially about Tunisian basketball in here. And then, of course, there are what we call the confounding factors, where basically somebody who's biologically more advanced, they often show better short-term performance, even without a greater potential. So early unfair selections of these exact people must be somehow avoided. Now, wrapping this all together, there is like one scheme that I really love that I picked up actually from one of my colleagues in Germany, and it is this. This is how they perceive talent. And all that we are looking for is what we call performance of competition. That is completely surrounded by what we call the factor X. The factor X is that unknown factor that you cannot measure or see, but we see in different players while moving forward or while becoming one of the best players. Now, of course, that is surrounded by the technique, the physical condition of the person, the height, all of that, the coordination, the tactical capacities of that person, and the psychological capacities of that person. And we will get much more into detail in the next slides talking about that. And that's wrapped around with the environment. So basically the family, home, the school, what's happening with the person itself, and the person themselves and how they are built up. Now, once we have looked at talent this way and have separated it from just short-term performance, talent identification now depends on what we want to do. Not all the clubs or all the coaches have the same objectives. So there are some clubs that are focused on participation. Some other clubs want to develop talent into high performance. And then there are some clubs that are fully focused on performance. And each of these just require different objectives. And if we have different objectives, we of course then have different criteria of selection around these clubs or these different structures. And then also different time horizons from the patience that we have to get that raw talent into the objective, whatever that might be. And in here, I actually look into these different kinds of clubs. So if you are part of a grassroots or a local club, it's basically the entry point to basketball. So we have a very wide and heterogeneous talent pool. And here the focus is usually on attracting these people into the sports of basketball. So you want it to be enjoyable. You want to work on fundamentals and like basic game understanding. So what is basketball? And then the competitive ambition of that exact group depends on the club culture, the club resources, and what they aim for. Do they just want to promote basketball? Do they want to participate in a certain level of game, or do they want to go fully into performance? And then talent identification here becomes a little bit informal and a long-term topic. The second part of this is basically what we call the development or the performance clubs that take talent from grassroots into performing clubs. And here we have some more structured player development environment where you or the coaches can have a little bit more access to resources, usually regional talent that you can gather into that one team. And here the emphasis becomes more about fundamentals, physical development, understanding the game a little bit better. Competition here is used as a development tool, not as an end goal. So basically, you're not playing for the result, you're playing or using the game to actually develop the player into a better player. And here it's a key transition stage toward elite basketball. The third type of clubs is what we call the elite or the professional clubs, which have a strong brand, and that brand usually attracts a lot of talent, and everybody wants to become a part of that. I don't know if we take, for example, Real Madrid as one of these clubs, and everybody just wants to go there. Everybody wants to have a spot in there, and that becomes a little bit different. So here you have two pathways, either early academy formation within that club, or they usually recruit high potential athletes from the country or outside the country and even other continents. And these usually have like very strong physical profiles and need some technical refinement if they come from different continents. Here you have a high internal competition, a selection pressure, more than a pure grassroots development culture. And the objective becomes to just produce professional players and first team contributors. And this comes a little bit closer to what we call also national teams that go from youth to seniors. And here again, it's about selecting the best available talent. So you have a better offer on the table when selecting these talents. And here, usually you have a short preparation window, you have very clear role clarity, you want to select the people that you want to use for that specific competition, or prepare them for the A national team, which then makes the game again or the competition a tool to get that talent or that raw potential from there to the A team. And then, of course, you have what we call federations or national pathways. And here it's like a long-term vision for basketball talent development that usually federations have. They define their playing philosophy, who they want to benchmark with. They coordinate clubs, national teams, coaching educations, and they can actually run very strongly their way or their path forward. So here, I'm just trying to make sure that everybody of you can select the area where they are actually right now. And based on that, the selection criteria change completely. Today, I am going to try to go in one route where I break it down from national teams down to U14 for some elite or performance clubs. So I'm not going to talk a lot about grassroots, and I'm not going to talk about like a complete federation or national pathway. I hope that is clear up until here. And again, I know this is recorded, so I will hand out at the end my contacts. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Now, let us think about how do we at the national team, since a couple of months, evaluate talent. First of all, of course, what everybody does and what the basis for all of this is the anthropometric measurements. So basically the height, the sitting height, the foot length, the wingspan of the players, their body weight. And then we do some tests for mobility, which are, for example, the squat jump, the counter movement jump without the arm swing, the standing long jump, the T-test, and the 20-meter sprint. And what I want to quickly show in here, of course, you can take this and adapt it to your club. This is the basis. This is what we start with when we gather talent together. And what I will show you actually in this lecture is how I picked it up from Coach Minak, how they actually set up the field. And here you can see that you have different stations. So the athletes run around the different stations, and then we have different coaches settled in there that will basically write down everything. And then we have basically an Excel or if you have a better software, which some federations have, that you can use to compare these different people. Now, looking at that first station, it's about here the foot length, the height, the sitting height, like the wingspan, and then the weight, and then you can move into a jumping station. You can go into the T-test with some zone of getting down in here, and then you have a 20-meter sprint on this side with a zone where you can basically slow down. And then while a group is running around these different stations, there is a different group that is warming up in this zone in the middle. Again, this is just an example that I picked up, and I really like it. It really works very well. So it is very quick, it is very simple to set up, and it's very simple to actually track. Now, this is just an example of an Excel where you can put all the names of your players and then just take all of these measurements and put them in here. Now, once the basis is set, once you have these measurements, you've seen the physical capabilities, what we then look at is the technical execution. And here, most of the clubs or most of the people, they're actually pretty deep on this. So we look about finishing. So can the player execute different types of layups adapted to the situation, reverse, Eurostep, floater, etc.? Do they have a stable shooting mechanic in catch and shoot situations coming off a cut or after a dribble? How are actually their dribbling and ball handling capabilities? So do they actually control the dribble with both hands in different situations? Do they actually handle defensive pressure while dribbling well, or do they just pick up the ball or even lose it? And can they actually change pace and attack their defender effectively? Those are basically what we look at if we think about dribbling and ball handling. And then on the passing side, do they actually deliver accurate passes? So with one hand or two hands, does the ball actually get where exactly it should get at the exact time where it should get to the hands of the teammate? And do they actually use fakes or preparation moves before they pass, or do they just like look what we call basically a phone call pass and then pass the ball there? Now here, these are, of course, high-level thoughts that can be broken down further, and I will show you how to break that down. The second part, which is also very important, is perception and decision-making. So can the player with the ball identify their teammates that have advantage in a certain position, even without the ball? Do they actually read defensive traps, defensive help, and get the ball there? And do they know when to attack, pass, or actually shoot? Now, without the ball, do they maintain actually proper spacing and adjust when necessary? Do they actually serve and react to the defender's behavior? Like if they're overplaying, I cut backdoor, or do they just keep on trying to get the ball on that one side? And then on the defensive side, do they actually analyze the strengths and weaknesses of their direct opponent and use it? So do they know actually the person in front of me is slower than me, so I want the ball and I want to go one-on-one? And do they actually anticipate half defense or any kind of off-ball rotations, and they execute that on time? The third part is the general game ability. Here we speak about game intelligence. So do they identify who can create an advantage for the team, and do they find that person? Do they understand the game and make decisions that lead to the best finishing option? So if I catch the ball on the 3-point line, there is one defender that is closing out. I am at a 60% 3-point shooting. The person next to me is actually only at 20%. Do I still take that shot, or do they actually pass it over to a lower percentage shooter? That's just as an example of what we mean in here. And then do they actually favor team play through relevant and well-judged decisions, or do they just go for themselves? And then we speak about creativity. So do they actually take bold initiatives to create an advantage? Do they actually use technical skills or decisions that are positively unexpected? And do they actually understand and exploit the opponent's weakness? So if I see the weakness of my opponent, am I targeting that exact weakness as a player? And then, of course, transition and anticipation. Am I actually one step ahead of the game? So do I think right now, or do I think next step? And you can see that actually pretty quickly while watching kids play. Do they position themselves and prepare for any kind of eventuality, or do they just stand still and do basically certain schemes? And do they actually react well to any kind of changes of situation? Now, why did I actually start with this? This is what we look for as an example for the national team. Now, of course, if we're speaking U12 or U14, this is not what you guys will be looking for. But in my opinion, or in my mind, this is where it all starts. So this is where the boys and girls are going to get or be judged according to. So how does that actually break down into U12, U14, U16, etc.? So how do I prep the talent that I have right now to get judged on this basis? And that is split into two. What are my factors of selection and prospection? And how do I work through the time that I have with the talents to get them then selected based on these kind of criteria? And again, there are no rules in here. This is just the idea that we have within our federation. Now, this is just the way to have a simple Excel and how we run through these different skills. Now, let's think U12, U14. It's, in my opinion, as if you are nurturing a small tree. So you look for the tree that will become the biggest and give you the most fruits, basically. And here, I guess summarizing it into 4 different things is how I would like to look at it. First is potential is more important than actual performance, or right now performance. Learning speed is much more important than just the current level that the person is at. So someone that has been playing basketball for 3 years is, of course, better than someone who just started a month ago. But then if you see them both over a couple of months, then you can pretty quickly see what is the learning curve of player A and what is the learning curve of player B. The third thing, we speak about coordination that is more important than just early size. And I think all of you have had this player that in the under 12 was like the highest, and they were already 1 meter 80 or something like that, but then they stagnated there. And everybody else came and went over that size, and that person just stayed where they are. So here it's very important to look at biological age, to look at also the parents, to look at different other factors while selecting. And the fourth thing, attitude, like being hungry for the game, the attitude is more important than just simple early dominance, right? Now, how do we take that and break it down into a U12 or a U14 talent identification? And here, I'm going to show an example of a checklist of how I see talent identification in that age. First, it's about coordination and athleticism. So, do they have good balance and body control? Is the player actually agile? Can they actually change direction in an easy way? Is the running coordinated? Is the jumping and the stopping actually coordinated? And are they comfortable using both sides of the body, or are they like very heavily on the right side or very heavy on the left side? The second part is the technical foundations. And here you have to look at it potential based, not just the status quo. Does that person handle the ball with both hands? Control is more important than speed. Do they actually pass accurately at the right moment? How does the shooting mechanics here look, regardless of the percentage or the range? So if you taught them a certain mechanic, is that actually easy for them to repeat and do again? How does their basic footwork look like? Can they actually stop, pivot? Can they actually start in an easy way? And then we speak about game intelligence. So now I'm trying to, again, with all of these, relate back to what we look at from a national team perspective, as we need to limit this lecture to that. And we can have other discussions about it in a different platform. So here, it's about game intelligence. So do they understand spacing and positioning? Like very basic spacing and positioning. I'm not speaking about outside positioning. I'm speaking about, do they actually keep distance to the next player? Do they make simple but correct decisions actually? Do they even move without the ball, or do they wait for the ball to always arrive to them and then start moving? And of course, if they in any way anticipate play rather than just react late to what's happening. The fourth part is learning and coachability. So if you tell them something, do they actually listen? And when they listen, are they capable of applying that feedback, even with technical difficulties or with technical mistakes? You can see immediately if they're actually trying to do what you're trying to tell them. Do these people actually improve within the session or over a certain short time? Do they try new solutions without fear? Or do they just keep to what you told them exactly? And here, I actually want to speak about the fact that we used to have coaches before that are very strict on like, you do exactly this, you do nothing around it. But what we lack a lot in high-level basketball, or what we look for the most in high-level basketball, is actually creativity, hunger, people that think outside the box, that play in a different way. As of like scouting is now so advanced that if you do not have that creative player, you're in trouble actually. Getting back to that, do that player actually ask questions? Do they actually show curiosity about the game and what you're trying to tell them? That's a very good sign. Now, moving further, you can look at psychological and behavioral traits of that player. So do they compete with energy? Do they have hunger? As I say it again. Do they recover quickly after they do a mistake, or do they like shut down and get into that deep hole? Do they actually show some self-control and respect? And do they actually work for the team or only for themselves? And you can identify that pretty quickly. Now, moving into physical potential, which is also important in a U12, U14 identification, but it has to be very contextualized. So do they have a quick first step and reactivity? How does the natural coordination look rather than just pure strength? Size evaluated relative to biological age, as I said in the beginning, and then no over-reliance on physical dominance. So there is a difference between somebody who is overutilizing on their physicality, if they're bigger than the rest, and players that just know how to use their body, but in the same time, they can play the game. The seventh part is creativity and playfulness. So, do they see multiple solutions? Are they actually comfortable improvising when the situation changes and it's not exactly the drill that the coach has given them? Do they enjoy the game and express some kind of personality? I don't know, but basically being happy about what happened or being sad about what happened, or do they express those emotions in a positive way on the court? Do they utilize those emotions and do they show a certain kind of personality on the floor? And are they actually afraid or not afraid to take an initiative and just do what needs to be done, or do they just keep passing the ball to the next player when it gets hard? And then all of this, what we have spoken about, it has to be put into context and also checked around bias. So relative age effect, is that considered? The biological maturity of the person, years of practice, how much have they been practicing, and then the performance to not be just judged solely on game statistics. So putting a certain amount of points or getting a certain amount of rebounds shouldn't be the only thing we look at. So this is now how we would drop down from what a national team wants, breaking that down, basically a U18 or a U16, breaking that down into what I should do in a U14 or a U12, or what I should look at from a selection perspective. So now let's say you guys have used this, well, and this has a lot of other detail that you have to break down yourselves. I have a couple of examples if anyone wants to get that, but you will have to break it down yourselves. Now, we have selected the person. And I can promise you right now, they won't have all those topics that the national team is looking for. And now you have to think based, again, on what kind of club you're at. So basically, which one of these you're at. What kind of level do you want to get to? What kind of raw material you have, which you can identify by these criteria, and set up a certain set of skills that you want to work at in the different age categories within your club based on your objectives. So here, this is an example of just skills. So if we reduce that to skills and look at, okay, what's my basis? Basically, what have I actually selected? What's the objective of my club? What do we actually want to do with this talent? And then create this path of what are the skills we want to teach them. And here you can see this is just a very simple table that has some shooting techniques and repetitions, for example, which you need it in all different categories. But then position-specific shooting, when we speak about short corner or after the high-low flash or certain kind of pull-ups, that's probably more towards the U19 than a U14 or a U16. And now every piece of these skills that you have here, you can see it differently. So you can see some things earlier or some things later. That's fully fine. It just depends on different factors that you have within your club. But now let's say we take one of these. How does that actually look like? So if we take the defensive footwork, if I look at it in a U14, we speak here about proper defensive stance while guarding the ball. So the player should be in balance, the body weight on the ball of their feet in order to be able to react quickly, not on toes, not on heels. Their knees are bent, Their toes slightly pointed outside to prevent opening the hips. Hands should be low and open to the ball. And then you take that and try to work with the talent that you have to get them further. Defensive footwork while moving. So basically, players should be taught the cross step to get back in front and open step. Turning hips to get into sprinting, not just moving sideways, basically. Toes should be directed to the sideline or half court to avoid opening of their hips and giving away a straight line drive. Making contact with the defensive player with their chest, not with arms. And in this age group, players should play one-on-one a lot, from dribble, from situation one pass away after closeouts, in order to learn to defend on ball and guard on an offensive player on their own. And as you can see, this is just one of these skills. And then you basically break it down to your U14. What do you want to see? Or what do you want to build up? And that's how you work with it. And then you have it for U16, you have it for your U19. Actually, let me show you one document that I've also stolen from Coach Bouzine. So here, basically for the under 14, you can see that there is a lot of details to what is needed. And then it goes further, and then you have the under 16, and it's basically different kinds of work that you have to detail, but you have to detail it for your own club based on your objectives and based on the talent that you have within your club. Now, moving further, how do we then execute? So we set up our objectives, and how do we actually integrate that work into the team and individual practices? So after you've looked at the basis, you've selected the right people based on the criteria that you have developed, and you can use an orientation of what I showed today. You need to try to get to a certain skill set that we just spoke about in here as an example. Now, how do you get from that basis to that skill set? It will have to be in two different paths. You will have to definitely integrate that into your practice planning. So every time you set up a certain practice plan, depending on what you're trying to get where you're trying to get your players to, you will need to incorporate that. And then you will need to incorporate that also into individual practices. So what we do a lot in Tunisia now for the last couple of months is that we collaborate with the club and with the athlete to have very individual plans. So here you can see, for example, for this player, we know exactly when she's going to school. We know exactly when she's going to practice, in which way, when is she going to have a shoot around, individual plans. And then we create very individualized plans for these different slots of them. Shooting from certain spots. We track that a lot. I mean, some clubs have access to this, some clubs do not, but then you can use Excels or work with very simple tools. But I think here the key message is it has to be incorporated into team practice, and it has to be incorporated also into individual plans. So those two cannot go separately from each other. We cannot put all the players into one bucket and just run team practice without having an eye on their personal development. And also, we cannot just fully rely on individual practices, because they need to utilize whatever they've learned on an individual perspective into their game and into their team play. Now, trying to sum up, and again, please reach out if you want any kind of details on this. First, try to make your own idea of what talent is. Then move into where do you actually want to get your players. And that is on the basis of What does your club want? What kind of coaching position do you have? What's the community you're running with? And then if we're speaking about performance in this specific case, what is being asked from either the performance club where you want to get your player into, or the national team that is awaiting for that player to get into. Once you've done that, you create your own selection criteria, and you have pretty solid orientation actually from what we spoke about. Then you create a plan of, for example, skills, but also other criteria. So that skill example that I showed is just a part of it. You can go further and see more out of that. And then you move from there into execution, which is how do I incorporate all of this work into my macro plan and then break it down until I'm speaking about the session plan. That's why I spoke about the session plan, because I think that's very important. And that should, though, come from a higher macro plan. And then also, how do I individually touch upon these different things with the players that I have? In summary, talent identification in basketball is a long-term process that goes far beyond early performance or early results. So let us not do the mistake of taking just the person that performs right now and think about who's going to perform tomorrow. It requires a holistic evaluation of physical potential, game intelligence, technical foundations, psychological traits, and learning capacity. All of that always considering biological maturity and the context of what's happening. The objective is not to select the best players today, but those with the greatest potential to develop tomorrow. Creating the right environment and pathway is essential to turn talent into sustainable high-level performance. So the work that we as coaches are doing is the most important, and we need to be very, very due diligent about how to break that down, how to prepare our players for what is awaiting for them. I'm not gonna make this even longer. I really thank you for your attention. I am available on all of these different means. If you would like to reach out or have more details of what we are trying to do, or just have a basketball conversation, I'm super eager to learn from you guys, and super open to share the thoughts that I have gathered from different colleagues or made up myself. I think the last thing I would say is um, I have been learning so much in these last years just by exchanging with my colleagues or going to some coaching clinics. And I think the most important part of that exchange is the fact of understanding that basketball is a game. It's a very complicated game, and ideas are always great if they work. So at the end, there is no right or wrong in the sports that we're doing in here. There is just perspectives and ideas, and exchange is basically what nurtures all of that into something sustainable. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't make this lecture too long, and I am super eager to hearing from all of you. Thanks again to the Arab Confederation and to the Tunisian Federation for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit of my thoughts. And I wish you all a good night, and see you soon.